All right, it's 7 o'clock on June 5th, and we'll call the meeting to order. If you join me in the flag salute, please. Thank you for that. Looks like everybody's here with the exception of Council Ort. She might be joining us shortly. Looks like she might be pulling in, but we'll see in a second. With that, is there any announcements as far as additions to the agenda? Any declaration of ex-party contacts, conflict of interest, bias, etc.? Okay. Appointments. Is there any appointments, Julia? No? Okay. This is an opportunity for public comment. Tammy, is there any public comments submitted? Reforms?
No.
No? Doesn't look like there might be. Okay. With that, we will move to the consent agenda. Can I get some action from the council on the consent agenda, please?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Petty. I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda as submitted. Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I do. So it looks like the CCRLS contract was included on this, or sorry, agreement, shouldn't have called it a contract, was included on this. And so I just had a quick question for the city administrator on this item. Was this agreement reviewed by the city attorney?
So I would advise you, the consent agenda is generally just truly consent. So I would recommend that you remove this from the consent agenda, move to the consent agenda, and then we can talk about that.
Sure. So in that case, I withdraw my motion.
Draw the second.
Okay. The motion and the second's been withdrawn. Councilor Batty?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move that we remove resolution number 1062 from the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to remove resolution 1062 from the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, Councilor Petty?
Okay, so do we want to go ahead and do presentations before we move on to that, or do we want to do?
Hold on, the actual revised consent agenda.
Yeah, now you're.
Oh, sure.
Yep.
So with that motion, I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Okay. As revised.
Sorry, I said with that motion. Okay. I move that we accept the consent agenda as amended.
Okay. Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as revised, meaning letters A and B, omitting C to stand on its own. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries 5-0. Councilor Patty?
Yes. So we can talk about this now or later after presentations, whatever you prefer, Julia.
We don't have a presentation, so we can talk
Okay.
about it now, if you so wish.
Okay.
I'll have Jana come up because she'll be able to speak to your questions.
Thank you so much. Hi, Jenna.
So this is an agreement we've been signing with CCRLS since the mid 70s. At some point, I'm sure it's been to the attorney. It is verbatim the contract that I signed last year. And a couple years ago, we had some language added that I got removed with the help of the attorney because I didn't feel comfortable with that language. But this is all. This is an agreement that we're capable of doing our side, and it has what we need from them in it. So I feel very comfortable recommending that you guys sign the agreement.
Thank you. I was just curious. So is anything added that our attorney has not reviewed or? No?
So this is the same, the CCRLS is a 5-year contract and then does amendments each year. So this is the first 5-year, right, one because we've passed the thing. So there's nothing that I feel like needed to go to the attorney in this one. And it also matches the one that we signed at the last 5-year agreement with the amendments on it. It's verbatim the same. So.
Okay. Thank you so much. Just wanted to check in on that.
I have one question
Councilor Julia.
on this.
and I tried to find it in this, but what type of authority does being a part of this like allow them over like what's in the library, things like that? What's the kind of cooperative agreement with that?
So we are part of a cooperative, which means we have our own governing body. So who the decision maker for what's in the library is me, and then the library board, right? We operate independently. That's different than other places where they have a system, like Washington County has a system where they're all governed by the same governing body. CCRLS all the cities and the municipalities all have their own governing body. So it works different.
Great. Thank you.
So just to clarify, so Jana, the cooperative in this case just allows us to share books with the others and share and get money for the patrons, correct?
So it provides a lot of services. So it's not just books like reciprocal borrowing, but it's also like the network connection for the library is paid for by them, right? So we're on their network. So all of that stuff is theirs. There's much of the equipment in the library is not my equipment, it's their equipment, right? So we got a lot of services from them and also a lot of opportunity because we have 18 libraries worth of buying power, 18 libraries worth of like that kind of power is a lot different than operating individually,
Great.
right? And the technology that we are provided from them, none of that is capable on our own. So
Yeah.
the shared catalog is not something we're capable of doing, all of that.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thanks, Jana. Julie, I think just from my standpoint, I think Councilor Patty brings up a valid discussion at the very least. And there's stuff like this contractually that's filled with pretty much a legal bent. How often is the city attorney looking at that stuff before it comes to council for us to make a determination?
So I think it is as needed. So I think what Jana is saying is this is something that's been around for a long time and we didn't have any concerns. I've got a lease that I'll be bringing to you at some point that has it's been drafted by the city attorney. So I think things that are new, things that are like major revisions, we absolutely, contract documents that Lance might be doing that are different than standard, we absolutely would have them review. But if it's kind of standard and the same and there haven't been any issues with it, we generally wouldn't need to go through the city attorney.
Good, just want to make sure. Thank you. With that, I think we're ready to do the public hearing.
Wait,
yeah.
you need to act on this resolution.
Oh, sorry, that's
Sorry,
right.
so it's,
Yep.
Resolution
Sorry.
1062.
What would the council like to do with the resolution 1062?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Giglio.
Yeah, I would move to adopt resolution 1062.
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty, seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt resolution 1062. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Now we're ready to do the public hearing, correct? Here we go.
That is correct.
Good evening. My name is Brian Quigley. I am the mayor of Stayton and I will be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set for the city council's public hearing in the matter of land use file number 3-02/23. Applications for a comprehensive plan map amendment and a zone map amendment to change the property at 320 West Washington Street from a comprehensive plan map designation of residential to commercial and a zone change from medium density residential to commercial general. This hearing is now open. Oregon land use law requires a statement to be made to those in attendance that covers certain matters relative to this case. That statement, with all the information required to be presented under ORS 197.763/5, is printed and available at the table at the entrance of the hearing room. If you have not received one of these forms, you should go get one and review it prior to presenting your testimony. If anyone has any questions regarding anything on the statement or objects to it not being read out loud, please raise those questions when it comes your turn to speak during the hearing. Also at the back counter is the agenda for this evening's meeting, which lays out the order in which people will be called on to speak during the public hearing. The Planning Commission's rules of procedure for land use public hearings and a brochure written to facilitate your participation in the public hearing. You are encouraged to obtain and read a copy of these documents as well. At this time, I would ask the audience if there are any objections to the notice that was sent in this case. I hear none. To the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider this case. I hear none. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or bias by any members of this body?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Giglio.
I would like to declare two things. First, it is ex parte contact, as I have seen this property quite a bit, and also a potential conflict of interest, as I am very close to this property in where I live.
Okay. Do you feel that will have any influence on your decision?
No,
Do you feel comfortable remaining involved in the process?
I do.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor McDonald.
I also live within a block of this property and it will not have any bearing on my decision.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? You heard those two declarations, and we'll move on. We're now ready for the staff introduction, Dan.
Dan, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you, so
Yeah, the
there you
light
go.
was on and then it went off. How's that? Better? This is a hearing on applications for
Is it better?
comprehensive plan map amendment
You pull
I'm
that
sorry.
towards you, Dan.
and
There you go.
zone map amendment. And it is very similar to the hearing and decision you made at your last meeting in that it is an application to change the comprehensive plan map from residential to commercial and the zoning map from medium density to commercial general. So with that, I will turn it over to the applicant to make their presentation. Then I will be back with the staff report and to go through the draft ordinance you have in front of you.
Ask away. Am I just saying what I'm going to use the property for? Oh, okay. I'm just like to have the property switched back
Can
to
you state your name, please, and your address?
Jason Genesis, and my address is 1160 Highland Drive.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Just asking for it to be switched back so I can run a upholstery shop out of there. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? All right, back to the staff report then, if you're done.
I will briefly hit on some of the highlights from my written staff report that you have in your packet, but not take up too much time going through the whole thing. Subject property is just less than 1/4 of an acre on West Washington Street. It is the former site of the Stayton dry cleaners for the past, I'm making up 50+ years since the building was built. And very actually identical to the case that you heard at your last meeting. This is property that was zoned commercial from the 1970s until 2018. And in 2018, the city initiated a comprehensive plan and zone map amendment for areas that had been zoned commercial, but were predominantly in residential use. And at that time, the comprehensive plan designation was changed from commercial to residential, and the zoning from commercial general to medium density residential. And these applications are to turn it back to as it was prior to 2018. You've got in your packet an analysis a transportation planning rule analysis that, again, very similar to the one that you had at your last meeting, determines that it is appropriate to cap the traffic that may take place after the zone change. So that is part of the recommendation and part of the ordinance that you have in front of you. Otherwise, the recommendation from the Planning Commission is to make the findings that are in the draft ordinance and to approve the application. And that is also the recommendation from staff. So if you've got any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Thanks, Dan. Questions from council? Anybody? Council Ort?
Thank you. So Dan, this has never been a residential property as long as the building's been there?
As long as that building has been there, and I actually had somebody come in who had gotten notice, who lives on Virginia Street, got notice of it and thought that the notice was for a zone change for property on Virginia Street. He was substantially older than I am and said as a kid, he worked there prior to it being the dry cleaner when that building was built in the 1960s.
Oh, wow.
So it was in some commercial use even prior to that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Looks like that was it. Anybody else? One more time. Oh, okay. Thanks. An opportunity for proponents' testimony. Is there any proponents' testimony? Okay. Oh, Russ, come on up.
Russ Strohmeyer, 325 West Washington. You guys haven't heard from me for a while, so I just thought, come say hi. No, really, I bought my property, which is right across the street, 45 years ago, just about. And Stayton Cleaners was always a commercial building. In fact, it was operated at that time by one of our former mayors, Wilmer Van Vliet. And I just wanted to be in support of changing this back. My property just across the street is zoned commercial. And a few years ago, when I got a letter from the city saying, basically it was, do you want to stay the same or change, right? And all I had to do was go to the city and say, yeah, I want to keep the zoning I have as commercial. And it's unfortunate that Steve, who owned the cleaners, didn't do the same thing. He told me that he didn't see the notice. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. And it's just, I want to be in favor of this and just say it's unfortunate that it has to be such a long, drawn-out process to get back to where it was before. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Russ. Opportunity for opponents' testimony. Is there any opponents' testimony? Okay. Is there any neutral or other testimony? Don't hear any. Another opportunity from the council. Questions from the council? Okay. Applicant summary. Anything else to add? Okay. Staff summary.
I've got nothing more. You've got the draft ordinance at the end of your packet, and at the end of my staff report is a set of recommended motions or suggested motions, and the recommendation would be to enact the ordinance as presented.
Thanks, Dan. Do I read the closing statement after the decision? Okay. This time I will close the hearing on ordinance number 1062 and let the council deliberate. Council? Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Ort?
I want to move to approve the application of Jason, sorry, I'm going to mess up your name. Genesis, land use file number 3-02/23 and ordinance 1062 as presented.
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty. I second that motion.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the application and first consideration of ordinance 1062. And is there any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Ort?
I just want to say that I am excited to see the building have some life being brought back into it, have a business there. So that's really cool. Thanks.
Everybody else? Okay. It's been moved and seconded. No further discussion. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Or do I need to hold the council
I
on
was
this one?
just looking, I think with an ordinance, I'm not sure what our protocol is, but
All right, well, let's back up.
yeah.
Tammy, can you please pull the council on this one? Just to be safe.
Counselor Gilio,
Yes.
Counselor Ord,
Yes.
Counselor Patty,
Yes.
Counselor McDonald,
Yes.
Counselor Sims.
Yes.
Matt, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. I have to read the statement now. The closing statement is, the council's action may be appealed within 21 days of the mailing of the notice of decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals under ORS 197805-855. Thank you. All right, leave this with general business, Julia.
First of all, I want to commend you all on a very expeditious, so far normally I'm like, it's a land use hearing. Usually those take longer. So the first item for general business is appointing a council member to serve as a representative on the Adaptive Management Group, which is the group that was formed with San Am Water Control District as an outcome of the MOU and legal agreement. It's something that really you should have been meeting regularly anyways, but there hasn't been anybody that's been appointed since I've been here. And I think, as you know, we have a lot of things that we're going to be discussing with them in the coming year. We're going to, first and foremost, is the water delivery contract that we will need to be negotiating, as well as Wilderness Park. We'll be updating our stormwater master plan, and they'll be part of that process with us. And then they're also doing a modernization project that we're going to want to be talking with them on as well. So the timing seemed very appropriate that we need to get that group up and running. And per the MOU, there needs to be somebody designated from council that would serve on that. And basically what I'm hoping to get is some direction. I think you could do it just by motion. I'm really trying to be a stickler for having things by resolution. So if you guys give me a name, I'll have something on the consent agenda item probably for the next meeting for you to formally adopt.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Sims.
I don't have a problem volunteering for that. I've worked in industrial wastewater, have some experience and that sort of thing. And there's some other folks on the homeless commission, so it take up some time. So I have no problem volunteering for that.
Thank you for stepping forward on that. Anybody else? Councilor Ort?
I was going to ask Counselor
So
Sims
was
if
I.
he wanted to do it. I thought you'd be good for that. So I'm seconding your.
Councilor McDonald, anything?
No, I was just I was hoping my name wasn't called, to be honest. With two teenagers, my schedule is pretty tight. So thank you to Councilor Sims for volunteering.
All right, we're all good with that. Any other discussion? It looks like you have a direction, Julia.
Great, thank you so much.
Yep.
So the next item for discussion might or might not take a little bit more time. So this is the council rules. We were going to talk about this a while back, but not all of the council could be here, so you tabled it. I think I've mentioned to some, if not all of you, my intent is not to go through the rules and make changes here, but to rather get an idea of where in the rules you want to have further discussion, and that will help inform me in whether or not we need to have a work session, just do it as part of a regular meeting. If there's very few, it can be done differently. So I'm just trying to get an idea of what topics on the council rules you want to have more discussion on. I do have one extra copy. If people didn't bring them, I emailed them a while ago, but I don't know if you have, if you want to kind of just go through chapter by chapter or. Yeah.
I think maybe in the sake of time, a better option might be to have the council review it and then submit their concerns to you, or.
That is perfectly wonderful. I did ask for that before and I didn't get any comments from anybody. So, but maybe so we can set a timeline or something like that so that,
Okay.
otherwise, if I don't hear anything, then I'm going to assume we're good.
All right. What does council want to do here?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty.
Ms. Patty?
I was just going to say, I think that now that we sort of are all talking about this, and maybe we could define the process a little bit, because I kind of like the mayor's idea of being able to submit some input to you, to have some direction for the next time we all speak about this. And I'll just say on my own behalf, I'm very sorry that I didn't respond to that. That's my bad. So I hope to go ahead and just be able to write something up to you and give you some direction on where we're looking for amendments here.
I agree. I didn't have enough time to, off the top of my head, I know the items I want to look at. I just don't have enough time to do that. And if we have a deadline, say if you want them by this Friday or next, whatever, we can make sure we get them to you, and then we can go with it from that point. If that's what the council wishes to do, unless you have it better, want to do it tonight, that's fine too.
Yeah, this was really just sort of forcing the issue, if
Sure.
you will, that I
Yep.
had. So if you, if you want to do it by this Friday or by next Friday, it's really up to the council and the mayor on what I just want to make sure that I'm not leaving it to drop.
Is next Friday enough time for everybody? Good. All right. We'll get it to you by next Friday for
Okay,
sure.
and then we'll put it on probably for discussion, depending on the type of comments in July or August.
And if you don't
July.
get enough responses by Friday, on Thursday night, let me know.
Okay, and it'll be not this Friday, but the
Correct.
following.
Following Friday, a week from this Friday.
Send them out.
Yep.
Yes, please.
I don't see them come across.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think I had it in my weekly update, and I think so. I will send them to you separate and with the deadline, the requested deadline.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks.
What's the date? What's that date, Julia? Do you know?
For that we're asking
Yes.
to be in by
16th.
June 16th.
June 16th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now you guys are really rolling through everything. I thought this was. So do you want to move on to communications? So communications from staff, just a couple of things, and then I'm actually going to ask Chief Johns to come up. I think some of you might have seen on Facebook a wonderful, cute picture of the Webelos that were out in front of City Hall. They planted the planters in front of City Hall, a new planter that didn't exist in front of the police station and in front of Public Works. So they were super cute and fun. And thank you to the mayor for being able to swing by and say hi to them. And it was just fun to have them come out and plant. And hopefully we keep the plants alive and they don't get sad. Community partner. We didn't have a community partner this week. I've got some ideas for some community partners to invite, but if there's anybody that you're wanting to hear from or an idea that you have, let me know and I'll reach out to them. I know the mayor had given me some suggestions for some folks that I was able to invite and came. So let me know if there's anybody in particular that you're wanting to hear from, and I'll definitely reach out to them. A reminder that the Homeless Task Force meeting, the next meeting is next Monday, June 12th. And based on input from you and the task force at the last joint council task force meeting, they indicated a desire to have council attend if they're able. So it's not mandatory, but you are invited to attend the next meeting, which is next Monday, or they'll be reviewing the draft code changes that are going to be coming to you the following week, June 19th. So with that, if there aren't any questions for me, I'm going to ask Chief Johns to come up and give a just an update on what the police department is doing regarding crime prevention and what we can be communicating to the public to do as well.
Thank you. So some question arose recently about crime prevention efforts within the police department. And truly the way I look at it, we have lots of different opportunities. Some are formal, some are informal, some are just natural in the patrol work that we do every day, and some come through programs. Police agencies, often objectives
refer to reducing crime and the fear of crime. And that portion, the fear of crime, is just as important to the reduction of crime. So how a person feels in their neighborhood or in their business districts is as important as, you know, what that crime rate actually is if they're fearful of it. So in Stayton, we're very fortunate that we do have opportunities on patrol to address things, not just be reactionary to calls for service. There are some jurisdictions in Marion County where that is all they do is respond to calls for service, and usually just high priority calls for service. So we feel fortunate in that we have the availability to do area checks. Typically we do about anywhere from 114 in the last couple months, and looking at stats to up to 150. That means that it's different than we're just driving around. It's a very focused area check. Usually it means the officer's getting out of the car, not just driving through areas. So if there's a area check here at the community center, we're checking the doors that they actually got secured after an event. We're checking the property to see if there's any issues, if there's maybe graffiti or we had a problem person on the property. Could be area checks at the schools. Again, checking for something that might look suspicious, might be problematic. The other night, the guys ran across the senior camp out. So that was kind of cool. Hadn't known there was going to be a camp out, and found lots of activity, good activity. But also on those area checks, it gives us a good idea of what normally the area looks like, and then what, you know, potentially problems or new, if there's graffiti or damage, something like that. It also gives a chance to engage with people that maybe are on the property, if it's the park, the plaza, something like that. We also address open doors, and what that means is if we're driving around at 2 a.m. and we notice a garage door open, we work to address that, whether it's closing it or waking up the homeowner so that they can close it. And I'll just say with this, you know, quite frankly, for me, I would be super thankful to have the opportunity to close my garage door, but that's because I live in a different perspective of life. And so we're trying to prevent, right? We don't want to see someone's garage cleaned out of valuables, but we have to sometimes tread lightly. We've had citizens that are not super happy about our contact. And so we do have to address these things differently depending on what the feedback is to us on what the citizens hope and want from this. We do bar checks, and that's for a variety of things, making sure there's not issues with the alcohol consumption and service, but also what's the tone in the bar, what's going on in the bar at you know, any given time. Field interviews or field stops. So it just gives us the opportunity to get out and talk to people that maybe you're in an area that doesn't seem right or the circumstances aren't fitting. So those kind of are loosely defined average patrol contacts or area checks that we do. As far as other more formalized things, whether it's me or other officers or supervisors, we work to be involved with county-wide task force or meetings where we're talking about different crime trends. Recently, an opportunity came up to start attending some gang intel meetings. And while I don't see issues here in Stayton, it's good to know what other communities are seeing. Like some neighboring communities are seeing a huge uptick in graffiti, and graffiti is a way for gangs to communicate their activity, whether it's to other gangs or within their own. So those are concerning things to keep on our radar, that if we see them in our community. I've had the opportunity to participate in a human trafficking task force and domestic violence task force. So again, it's looking at what trends are, what we can do in our community to address these issues. And then you often hear about just different community policing. And while that can be just a broad term for a lot of things, here I feel like we do a good job in those efforts of getting to know our community, getting to know the needs and wants of our community members and our business members, and creating relationships. So we very frequently see people come to us seeking out maybe solutions or ideas. If I had this, what do I do? I'm concerned about this with my aging mom and her being a victim of fraud. How do I address that? How do I safeguard it? And I think truly by having those good open relationships, people feel comfortable to come and have those conversations. Or if we're out in the public, stop and ask those questions. So I think that, the purest community policing right there. The other thing that I would say more formalized, our National Night Out, and that gives us the opportunity to interact with neighborhoods, encourage neighbors to know their neighbor. That's a huge piece of crime prevention, knowing what's normal in your neighborhood, what's not normal, who should be coming and going, and then also that familiarity and that comfort level of asking, like, hey, I saw this, calling your neighbor. I see this guy at your house. It doesn't look right. Should he be there? Should he not be there? And or feeling comfortable enough to report stuff. We also partner on different safety events. While it may not be crime prevention itself, but that education and keeping our community safe. So recently, the kids' safety events with the hospital. We have that fraud flyer that I spoke about at one of the meetings where we actually went out and were talking to different businesses on if you see these sort of things, there may be some fraud that's happening. And we would much rather do that than like this week, a lady brought in her elderly mom who had unfortunately got a $10,000 cashier's check and sent it off to, someone that's committing fraud. We partner with handing out free helmets in the community, free gun locks to keep things safe. Our Take Me Home project. We do vacation home checks, which another, it's a huge preventative piece. If we have a home that we know is going to be sitting vacant for a week or 2 weeks, going and checking, making sure that things still are secure, and knowing who to contact if there's something wrong. Our I Love You Guys program, it's where an officer goes into school and talks about, maybe different security things or ways to keep the school safer, and then how to respond in lockouts and lockdowns. And then I would say also our community engagement with things like Chamber, Rotary, Santiam Integration. At times, we're just attending as a participant, but at times we're also doing presentations in regards to different topics or issues as relating to crime prevention as well. So I would say the other part of that too are the little side conversations that happen. So the last banquet that I was at afterwards, there were 2 or 3 side conversations that occurred after, which would not if we weren't, present to engage the public there. Are there any questions?
First off, Chief, thank you so much for this. Just to out myself, I asked for this, just kind of a presentation of what our crime prevention strategies are here in Stayton. I feel like that's pretty appropriate for some of the things I've heard recently. The other thing, I just wanted to go ahead and plug you a little bit more here. You were discussing this thing with, happened to notice garage doors being open and talking to property owners. If I remember right, isn't there some sort of process we can identify being out of town for a while to let law enforcement know in Stayton so that they could kind of keep an eye on things?
Yep, absolutely. So I kind of passed over quickly, but vacation home check. So usually people just call Rachel because that's what they know to do. I think that we've got something on the website, but if we know either through dispatch or through our front office, we'll ask stuff like, how long are you going to be gone, or any lights on? We'll sometimes make suggestions on, leave a light on or put a light on a timer, leave the outside lights on, what cars should be there, who's the emergency contact.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Chief. One final thing that I'd like to put you on the spot for. You mentioned crime trends earlier. and the group that you're a part of, and how the gang activity is being identified in other jurisdictions, but not our own, which, thank goodness. Are you aware of any crime trends in our jurisdiction that we should be aware of?
No, and it's always an interesting thing because my perspective as a police officer is if the average citizen feels that their neighborhood is safe, their community is safe, then we're doing our job. Every single community has crime. There's not a community that's not somehow touched by it. Some have more than others, right? And some of that's geography. Do they have big box business in their area that's a draw to certain, more population coming in and out, highways coming through there. So a lot of different things contribute. I wouldn't say we have any trends per se. And yes, we are fortunate we're not having some of the violent crime that Salem or Woodburn and those areas are seeing. But as far as any trends, I haven't seen any.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. The only thing I also just want to offer is perhaps some of this being showcased in the newsletters that go out with the water bill. I feel like a good reminder to lock your doors and things like that is always in order every now and again. Just a suggestion.
Absolutely, and suggestion taken. So Tammy is the recipient of my beefing up some reminders that will go out both on Facebook and in the newsletter.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Giglio.
Hi, Chief. I just had a couple questions. One was on traffic enforcement, although I will say you guys were doing a great job this week. Somebody
thank
got
you.
me. It was fantastic.
See, be careful what you ask.
It's fantastic. I was very happy. I was like, dang it. This is what I get. This is what I get. No, but it was a great interaction. It was fantastic. And I was curious though. So when I was looking back through the numbers in terms of enforcement and traffic enforcement, the big drop in traffic enforcement did not come during COVID. It came right before COVID in the year prior to COVID. I think it was the first year under Chief Friesendahl.
Mm-hmm.
And what have been the difference? What would you say the differences have been kind of under your tenure to start to because I've heard that there is more enforcement that's happening now than there was previously. What have those changes been looking like?
Yeah, and I'll say I'd made some notes after the budget meeting because I was curious too, like when was the drop? What was that in regards to? And one thing I will mention, 2019, we do need to recognize that the police department lost their administration. To lose both leaders it is a tough thing. And, I wasn't here. I don't know the impact, but I have to imagine. And then talking to some of the officers, I know at one point there was some concern. What did that mean for the individual officers and their jobs? What did it mean for the agency itself? So the chaos, I don't know if chaos is the right word, the uncertainty, right? The unsettled feeling and having to manage through that, I have to imagine played in somewhat to that, and then a new rebuild, right? And so I would have to imagine that plays into how a agency functions, how they move forward in a rebuild as well. Interestingly, because after the budget meetings, there were questions about traffic enforcement, comparable agencies, and so I have done some work in regards to that. It has been interesting and pretty telling. I've reached out to a few different chiefs, and their ask of me is, well, now that you're collecting all this information, please share that document with us. And one thing we did find is the trend is very similar across agencies, and it doesn't matter really the size. There was that dip in 2020. For us here, not only was it COVID, and quite frankly, we had to look at, as police officers and police agencies, people didn't want to have personal contact or close contact, right? And so for us to stop a car and our face is in someone else's face, there was pushback from the citizens in regards to not wanting to have that sort of contact, as well as keeping our staff safe and healthy and all that. So there was a reduction across the state, across the nation in traffic stops. Our community faced the wildfires. So again, we were looking at, we may be stopping people that just lost their home, that can't pay their bills. Do we want to add that extra stress? I mean, obviously we want safety in our community and we want accountability, but trying to serve with some compassion and grace as well played into that. I think then staffing shortages across the board in agencies. Pretty much every chief that I talked to in this search of stats in the last 2 weeks has addressed that of, yeah, they might have the numbers, but they've got young officers that are going through training. And so you've got a field training officer with a recruit. So everyone saw a drop 2020, most kept a drop in 21 and 22. And then this is the year most agencies are seeing that rise again, as are we. So in our monthly stats, I've asked to have our traffic stats included. So Julia will see that. They'll be on our website. In addition, I will get those comparables to you as well. One of the challenges, and as with anything with stats, is knowing what's behind the stats and what the stats mean. So a ticket could mean a ticket, a UTC, a uniform traffic citation complaint. However, on that piece of paper, there's 3 blanks for 3 violations. So some stats, this is 1. Some stats, if all 3 blanks are filled, that's 3. And so that can lead to different numbers as well. So as with any stat, a stat can tell a story as long as we understand what is behind that stat and circumstances that play into it. You're welcome.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Chief, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Julie, anything else?
That's all I had, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have of me.
Anybody? Okay. Doesn't sound like it. This is an opportunity for communication from the mayor and the council. I will just expand upon what Julia said about Cub Scouts coming. That was Troop 7050, and that's a continuation for you guys that don't know. They reached out to the city, to myself, in like March, around there. They were interested in doing a government project or getting their badge for government. I guess there's a badge they can get for government. So the discussion was, will you come talk to us? And so myself and Councilor Ort went to their meeting and had a great conversation with those kids. That continued to, obviously, the presentation of the flag salute at one meeting, and then the finale was them getting involved in community engagement, i.e. planting the flower. So that was kind of cool to see them come out there and beautify downtown. And there was a lot of traffic on Saturday, to our surprise, and the kids did a great job, and they were enthusiastic. The parents did a great job helping them. So lots of acknowledgement from the community. So great job from that standpoint. This afternoon, just so you all know, I had a town hall with Congresswoman Chavez DeReamer, and it was a good information session for all the mayors in her district. Us being one of those, I thanked her for her carrying forward the community project funding and see what we can do there. And there's some stuff on the horizon that she's working for. She came from a background of being the mayor of Happy Valley before she's in her current position, so she can really relate to the stuff that we find out here doing what we're doing. And I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to see what happens with our community project funding coming up. That's all I got. Anybody else? Council? No? Awesome. With that, we will adjourn tonight's meeting.